Welcome to the newest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast. My name is John Schmeelk. This is going to be our usual annual summer look at some of the most recent analytics in the NFL. Usually it's George Shakruri that joins us, but today it's going to be his colleague over at Pro Football Focus. That is their chief data scientist. He's head of R&D, Dr. Eric Eager. Eric, good to have you on the show. I think we've had every other of the PFF guys on this show over the years, but we finally having you. How are you, man?
It's good. I know George has become so big time that I've had to take some of his media away from him, but it's really good to chat with you. And I'm excited about a Giants offseason that has been profoundly functional.
Yes, let's talk about it. So I'll start with a real basic question. Why should Giant fans be excited when you look at the data about Brian Daboll coming in to be the head coach?
Well, I think it's unmistakable as far as, how good that Buffalo offense has been. One of the most efficient in the league, despite the fact that the Buffalo, weather is the worst in the NFL as far as temperature and wind and stuff. And they're still able to be a high power team. They have 3 playoff victories the last 2 years. Josh Allen went from a quarterback that I think many people believed was on the route to being a bust to being, an MVP candidate, a max contract type of player. You add all of that, and then I think it's the delta over what they had. And, Joe Judge was an unconventional candidate, an unconventional signing, and, Jason Garrett was his offensive coordinator. And it just wasn't working, right? And not only did it not work, it at some point it ceased having a chance. And so, with Daboll, you go from one of the most functional franchise in the NFL, in my opinion, the Buffalo Bills. You come to the Giants, and I think there's just gonna be a level of competence that Giants fans have not been used to for the past few years.
What is it about the way Buffalo's offense function and the way Daboll called plays, and we don't know who's going to call plays this year, combine that with Mike Kafka coming on from Kansas City, again, one of the best offenses in the league over the past few years. What do those guys do specifically when you look at the data that you think could maximize some of the things the Giants have on their roster?
Yeah, they really get the most out of their offensive line, both of those guys. So Kansas City last year had the highest rate of perfectly blocked runs. And it's not necessarily because they have the greatest offensive linemen in the world, but just because they negotiate box counts so well that they leave good matchups for their offensive line. And Buffalo is the same way. Their offensive line struggled some last year in terms of matchups, but they ran the RPO game in such a way where once you folded in the RPOs, they had basically a league average run game, which I think most people would say, oh, they were so terrible running the ball. But if you count the plays where Josh Allen pulled the ball out and threw it, they were pretty good. So, when you look at the Giants, Daniel Jones, one of the more effective rushers of the football at the QB position, hailed for his accuracy at times at Duke and things like that, and has at times been more effective than I think that the statistics suggest, or the plain level statistics, PFF grades have been okay. You look at the playmakers they have with Kadarius Toney, Saquon Barkley, Kenny Golladay, more of like a contested ball kind of player, but still, a 1,000-yard receiver in this league. You add in, Andrew Thomas was terrific last year. You add Ekwonu to the mix, Evan Neal to the mix. And I think that there are the components of a good offense. And I think that there are some cheat codes that Daboll can put into the system to actually, unleash an offense that has been putrid for the most part since, the Joe Judge era started.
And you even go back before that, Eric. It's been a rough few years here for the Giants offense. So I want to dig into a bunch of stuff you talked about there. Let's start with the offensive line first, because I think Giant fans finally think they're on their way. Maybe not there yet, but on their way to solving the offensive line issue, which has been an issue since 2013. Evan Neal, Andrew Thomas, back-to-back first-round picks. You bring in a couple of vets, Mark Lewinsky, John Feliciano inside. Are you a believer in the just get to average mentality, where if you can just be fine on the offensive line, as long as you have the weapons, you're good? Where do you land in terms of how much you have to invest in the offensive line for your offense to function at a high level?
Yeah, I think so. I think the get back to average thing is, I think, a plain mathematical thing. It's like if Andrew Thomas going from being terrible as a rookie to pretty good as a sophomore is going to be way more important to this team than him going from very good as a sophomore to a Pro Bowl player as a third-year player. Evan Neal being an average offensive tackle in year one is going to matter so much more to this team than him becoming great in future years. Like you want your weakest links on the offensive line becoming better is almost always better than your good players becoming amazing. And that's just a mathematical fact of life. And so, the Giants here, when they took high draft picks to acquire their tackles. And I like that because it costs a lot of money. As the Kansas City Chiefs found out with Orlando Brown, that negotiation, kind of a guy who's a 7 out of 10 as a tackle, wanted 10 out of 10 money. It's really hard, to sign tackles. It's fairly easy to sign centers and guards. And so when you can sort of get on the green at the guard position using your money, that is a positive thing. And the Giants have done that. And I think, they're not going to remind anybody of like the middle of the 1990s Dallas Cowboys on the offensive line, but I think that they'll be good enough if Daniel Jones is takes a step forward under Daboll. They're going to be good enough not to ruin that.
We're joined by head of R&D for Pro Football Focus, Eric E. You're also head of the PFF Forecast podcast. Go check it out. Eric, you talked about Daniel Jones being a runner, and I think Giant fans agree that, yeah, he's an effective runner. Then they say, oh, no, we don't want him to be hurt all the time, which has also been a problem. Does the data show that the more reps you give a quarterback running the ball, the greater the chance of injury? Because I do think there is some more danger in the pocket sometimes. Guys get legs rolled, ankles rolled, knees rolled, stuff like that. What does the data show in terms of usage as a runner in terms of keeping quarterbacks healthy?
Yeah, there's always that sort of and I know he was in the division with the Giants, but like when Rich Kotite told Randall Cunningham to stay in the pocket and he got injured in the pocket all the time. And he's like, why when I ran, I could sort of keep these things at bay. We've seen Lamar Jackson, that it has pushed the envelope, has been the most designed runner in football we've ever seen. And last year it sort of fell off because, of injuries and things like that. So there is that risk. There haven't been that many running quarterbacks. And the data is pretty scarce at the levels, that maybe Daniel Jones wants to run. Because you have, for every Lamar Jackson, there's a Josh Allen who never gets hurt, right? And there's a Patrick Mahomes who never gets hurt, or a Steve Young that rarely got hurt for San Francisco. So I think the question that I think Giants fans have to ask is if you're not extracting all the value out of Daniel Jones now, what are you saving him for? Right. And so I think you want to extract all the value out of him now. And if he struggles, then of course you're going to move on. If he gets hurt, you're going to move on. And if he plays great, then you have a good problem to solve.
Yeah, and I feel like over there at PFF, and I've talked to a bunch of the guys, it's kind of split on where they land on Daniel Jones, right? Because a lot of his PFF grades are better than some of his traditional production numbers over the last couple of years. Where do you land looking at his career so far, his trajectory, what's been around him, some of the data? Do you think he has a good chance of earning a long-term deal this year, or do you think there's a long way to go?
I think there's a long way to go just because the bar for what so we've seen this before, right? Like Kyler Murray gave the Cardinals no discounts really, right? That was a $46.1 million per year deal. Generally speaking, it's an on or off switch as to whether or not that guy gets a contract. Baker Mayfield, was kind of at that bar last year and then had a terrible season. And now, he's not going to make that much money. He's not going to make 20 million a year. So there's a huge chasm between, the guys like Kyler Murray, the guys like, Mahomes, Allen, Dak Prescott, even, who did get a franchise tag, and, guys like Jameis Winston, guys like Mitch Trubisky, guys who are drafted high who didn't work out. There isn't like a middle-class quarterback contract because
there aren't a lot of guys making between 25 and 35 million is what you're
because it's so cheap to go back into the draft and just draft the next guy, right? The Jets fail on Darnold, they go get Zach Wilson. The Cardinals fail on Rosen, they go back and get Kyler Murray. It's not, long gone are the days of, what Eli Manning cost the Giants to be their first pick. Sam Bradford for the Rams. It's not a huge investment anymore. To draft a quarterback high money wise, the way they used to be. So teams are willing to do it and they're willing to discard, the Daniel Joneses of the world. I think the best case scenario for Daniel Jones is for him to play well, and to eventually, sort of earn the tag. And if that happens, then they can go back to the table and might cost the Giants more money if they're wrong about him. But I think they gladly pay the $50 million it's going to end up being if he becomes an elite quarterback.
What are the things Giant fans, aside from the basic stats that they know to look for, Eric, that you think they should be keeping an eye on, whether it's your guys' specific metrics or something else that you like to watch, where you're seeing the progress where, you know what, we're willing to do one more year with Daniel on the tag and see where he's at. Where do you look for the most improvement in the areas he needs to get better at that might give Giant fans, confidence? That's all right. Let's give it one more year and see where we're at.
I think for him, it's not even, and this is where a lot of folks were, critical of PFF because we didn't grade him as well as a rookie, even though he had great numbers, 24 touchdowns, 12 picks. But where I would look is, what percentage of pressures are turning into sacks? 2020, that number was 22%. Last year was a little bit better at 16%. How often is he taking sacks? How often is he taking pressure? Because pressure is, generally speaking, half a quarterback stat and half a quarterback stat, half a offensive line stat. So is he taking less pressure? Is he converting fewer of those pressures into sacks? When he scrambles, what is his, is he scrambling to gain yardage, or is he scrambling to get hurt? That kind of thing. And the other one, which this one is the one that fell off, is, after a 2020 season where he was pretty good, he had 17 turnover worthy plays and 24 what we call big time throws. He regressed last year, 7 big time throws, 12 turnover worthy plays. A lot of those are fumbles in the pocket. He actually got better at that last year. He was terrible in his first couple years. But it's all about, for me, it's not even the throwing necessarily. It's more the, how's he doing with pressure? Can he be effective at not getting sacks with pressure? And then can he not fumble the ball in the pocket? Because those are drive killers that I don't think that the Giants can really put up with. But you look at things like yards per attempt and stuff like that. I mean, the first 5 games of the season, he's 7.5 yards per attempt, 10.1 yards per attempt, 7.6, 7.8, 7.2. All of those are more than passable at the NFL level.
Yeah, and look, I think you hit it, right? He's done a good job of reducing the turnovers, but the big plays have gone down with that, and even more dramatically. You got to get the big plays back up a little bit, but keep the negative plays down. One other thing on the offense, Eric, I want to ask you, because I know as of a few years ago, there was a big corollary where teams that use more pre-snap motion tended to be more effective, expected added points, stuff like that. Has that stuck, or have defensive figured out a little bit more how to deal with some of that pre-snap motion? Is there as much of a corollary anymore?
No, it's there. I mean, and the things now, it's pre-snap motion, it's play action. RPOs are a little bit interesting because I do think that the league is sort of finding out you're just not seeing linebackers move as much. So RPOs are nowhere close to as effective as before. But yeah, I think it's all those things, pushing the easy buttons. The other one is box count negotiation.
Right.
If you have Saquon Barkley in the backfield, can you play 4 wide receivers and still block up the run play? Because I think if Barkley is one-on-one with linebackers, you're probably in a good spot. So, I think for them, it's going to be trying to push all the easy buttons. You did see a lot of motion the other day in their practice, which I think is a great thing because it's just going to unlock some of the stuff that Kadarius Toney, can do, as well as, the Sterling Shepards and the Darius Slaytons of the world that I think, I know Slayton's second string right now, but, guys that I think can be effective players. It unlocks some of their talents.
All right, last team specific question before we get into some like generic concepts. Wing Martinsdale's defense. Obviously, we know pressure, a lot of man-to-man, try to get sacks, give up some big plays. The corners got hurt last year. Everything went to you know what. Are we missing anything with Wing's defense, or is that what the data tells you too?
No, it's there, and I think this is where the Giants fans can be a little nervous, right? Because when I looked at the Ravens, now the Giants have if not, I can't remember if when I reran the numbers, they ended up having the easiest schedule in the NFL. But the Giants' schedule is 1.32 points better than the average team's schedule on a neutral field, meaning like they're playing a very easy schedule of opponents. And so this might not matter this year because what man coverage does is it exacerbates the differences between the two teams. So for the longest time, the Ravens, they would play a ton of man, and because they were so good, they would shut teams. Like I remember there was one game where they had sacked the Titans 11 times and shut them out on the road, and there was nowhere for anyone to go. And they had, league's best defense in 18, a really good defense in 19, and then they faced a team like Kansas City, and because Kansas City is actually better, it exacerbated that difference, and Kansas City puts up 40 on them. You know what I'm saying? So that's the Wink Martindale defense. I kind of hope that maybe there's a little bit of, okay, when we play the Dallas Cowboys, we're going to play a little bit more zone. But play the Eagles and their great receivers right now. We play a little bit more zone. But what that defense does is it says, look, we're gonna bring 4.5 a play. You're gonna need Azeez Ojulari to build off of the sack total he had as a rookie. You're gonna need you're gonna need Kayvon Thibodeau to be what everybody thinks he is, when he was the favorite to be the number 1 overall pick at times last year. Obviously Leonard Williams is gonna have to make his money. And the corners, I know without Bradbury, they're going to have to hold up, and that's that's a tall order, but that's the bet that they're making back there.
All right, so let's talk generically now, and this is obviously specific to the Giants too, but team building. What, in your mind, looking at how teams have done it over the past 5 or 6 years, is the best way to go about building a team? Because the Giants, maybe not from scratch, but a lot of contracts came off last year, a lot more going to come off the next couple of years, and Joe Shane's going to have a really, low salary floor to build this thing the way he wants, right? What's the best way to do this? Do you build and then bring the quarterback in last? Do you bring the quarterback in first? Do you really build up front and build out? I know you guys are a big secondary over pass rush outfit. How would you suggest a team best go about maximizing their resources to build a team most effectively?
Yeah, it's never as easy as saying, okay, start with this and then that, because the hardest thing is quarterbacks aren't always available.
What's available to you, right? Exactly.
Yeah, so I personally believe, so take Matt Stafford. Like, I don't think you can build around Matt Stafford, but I think you can throw Matt Stafford onto a winning team and win a Super Bowl, and we've seen evidence of that. We've seen evidence of that in both directions, right? As Detroit Lions fans will tell you. You can't build around Kirk Cousins, but you can put Cousins on a great team and do okay, I think. Tannehill's the same way. They put Tannehill on a team that had been winning, and he took them to the AFC Championship game. But I don't think you can build around Brian Tannehill. And the problem is the Tannehills and the Staffords and the Cousins are the quarterbacks who are available. And they're expensive. Cousins was expensive. Tannehill was expensive. Stafford is extremely expensive. So if you're a rebuilding team like the Giants, you don't go down that path unless you're trying just to get to 8 wins to save your job. And even in that case, like that's not what this regime for the Giants is at. This regime is in it for the long haul. And so they want to build like a sustainable way. The problem is some drafts don't have quarterbacks that are worth it, right?
Like this year.
This past draft, there weren't quarterbacks that were worth doing that for. So it's tricky, right? And so I think, and the same thing, by the way, the Browns, when they bottomed out, they were wrong about Wentz, they were wrong about Goff, they were wrong about Mahomes and Watson, but they were right about Trubisky. And they drafted Myles Garrett at 1 and pushed the decision back a year before they got Mayfield. And that seemed to work for them until Mayfield bottomed out. So I think it's one of those where you have to either build through the draft at quarterback, right? You can build around a rookie deal quarterback because you have the money. You can't build around a Kirk Cousins because you don't have the money because you're paying Cousins too much. So you start with a quarterback who is on a rookie deal. You build around him, right? And then the hardest decision that you ever have to make as a team is whether or not that quarterback who did well on a rookie deal because you were able to supplement the roster with great players and great coaching, whether that guy's going to be good when your offensive coordinator gets a head coach job, when you have to trade Tyreek Hill to the Dolphins, or you have to trade Devontae or AJ Brown to the Eagles. That's a harder question than, is this quarterback I drafted any good?
This is also in that team building department. We do a ton of draft stuff here, and we have this, a position value battle with me and my co-host all the time. I'll even go top 15 here. At what point do you not take a premium position player in the top 15? Because my argument is that, look, I can go find the really good guard in the free agent market pretty much every year, and I can sign him, and I'm fine. Same thing for a safety. I mean, Anthony Harris 2 years ago, he was like the second best safety in the league, and bring him in for nothing. Or not nothing, but not a significant cost. So at what point for you, when you look at data and how positions impact winning, would you say, all right, in the top 15, I'm comfortable not taking one of those premium positions, corner, edge, tackle, receiver, quarterback?
Yeah, I would let somebody else make that mistake, right? I mean, and it's hard to say because, you might be a team that's a guard away. You might be a team that is, that you might see a Kyle Hamilton and say, okay, that guy's who I want to have on my team, right? Jamal Adams, Derwin James, although Derwin James went at 17, Quentin Nelson. But the problem is you can get those positions, like those guys are almost always top 10 paid at their position the moment they step on the field. Eric Berry, now this was a different CBA, but Eric Berry was the highest paid safety the first game he was in the NFL. So you have to take that differential into account. You have to take, when Burrow was a rookie, he was making $10 million less and half as much money as the next highest paid quarterback in the league who was a starter, which was Teddy Bridgewater. That delta is so valuable. That surplus is so valuable. And you only get it when the premium positions are up, right? As I said, left tackle is like starting pitching in baseball. If you want to get an average one, it's $15 million is the starting point. And whereas, a guy like Evan Neal or a guy like Andrew Thomas, I mean, you're making a half to a quarter of that, depending upon where they're drafted. And that to me, you have to take that into consideration. You can no longer just be like, hey, just draft good football players because roster building is just too difficult. And when you are a team like the Giants, when, you're going to have to make a tough decision about your quarterback, you're not afforded though. If the Kansas City Chiefs have to make tough decisions about Orlando Brown and Tyreek Hill, the Giants sure as hell have to make tough decisions about who they draft and who they keep. And what positions they use their resources on.
No, great point. All right, Eric, I love talking about this with George when he's on, and I know you're the one at the cutting edge here, so I'd love to get your take. What are some of the new things you guys are researching, thinking about, and trying to figure out? We talk all about the things here, passing in early downs, play action, being more aggressive on fourth down, some of the things you guys have focused on how teams can win at the margins. What are some of the new things you guys are researching and looking at that will help teams do a better job winning at the margins and just helping them be more successful?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's looking at weak link systems. It's exactly what you asked about the Giants offensive line, which is, how can I be better? How do I get better? Do I get better by making sure that Trent Williams is on my team, or do I get better by making sure that Riley Reif is on my team, right? And that kind of thing or in the secondary, you look at the Bengals last year and, they took the surplus that they had by going Burrow, Higgins, Chase. They took that and they had 6 defensive backs on their team last year that were regular starters for other football teams in a previous season, meaning they had NFL experience. And not to say that Eli Apple was a gamble that they thought was going to work, or that, Chidobe Awuzie was a gamble that thought was going to work, but they brought them all in and said, hey, we're going to take the best 3 out of this group. And ultimately, Trey Waynes was the highest paid guy in the group, and he was played the fewest snaps, but they were effective. And, that's kind of I think that kind of team building strategy where you look at the weakest link and you look at these things as systems more than you look at them as individual players, and Giants fans, I think that, that it's hard because you've had Lawrence Taylor, right? And you think about those Super Bowls, it's all about Lawrence Taylor. You can think, well, actually, Leonard Marshall is pretty good, and Mark Collins is a pretty good corner. And you look around that defense, you're like, weren't that many bad players on the defense. And so obviously Lawrence Taylor can be amazing, and you win Super Bowls that way. For most teams, it's about not having weak links and then having the quarterback that either is amazing on a veteran deal. Like I'm talking Mahomes, Brady, Rodgers, Peyton Manning type quarterbacks, or it's having a quarterback on a rookie deal and you hit on that window when they're cheap.
All right, 2 specific things I wonder if you guys have been able to quantify yet. Turnovers is the ultimate coach thing, right? Where it's like win the turnover battle, win the game. And frankly, if you look at the numbers, it's generally right. Yep. But at the same time, turnovers are hard to quantify, right? And it's hard to figure out, all right, well, this is how you create turnovers. This is how you prevent turnovers. There isn't a formula for that. And players with interceptions, year-to-year changes, teams, the plus minus, it can change from year to year like that. Have you guys been able to figure out at all the magic behind the turnover, how you can create them, how you can prevent them? And because they're so important to winning, but there really doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason to a lot of them.
Yeah, you have to find the process. So at pff.com this week, I wrote an article about how to bet interception props. And if you get a PFF subscription, you can get access to our turnover worthy plays metric. Turnover worthy plays predict interceptions better than interceptions do. And so, when you look at somebody, like Daniel Jones is a rookie, 24 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, but a lot of turnover worthy plays. It doesn't surprise folks that the next year's interception to touchdown ratio is more like 1-to-1. So preventing turnover worthy plays, quantifying the differences in turnover. So a sack fumble is almost always worse than an interception because an interception can often gain yards for the offense, right? You're throwing the ball deep and it gets picked off. Being able to sort of say, to make a gradient of how bad a turnover is, like those kind of things I think can help you. And so you're not so tethered to this, we were plus minus in the turn-away giveaway ratio. And
you would say generally, real quick, turnovers have more to do with mistakes than by the offense than great plays by the defense, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Almost everything in football is driven by the offense first, and then the defense can come in, which is why, you see teams like the 2017 Jags and the 2018 Bears and teams of that nature never are able to sustain brilliant enough defenses to support the Blake Bortles and the Mitch Trubisky's of the world, because ultimately, if you stop 20% of drives and turnovers for an entire year, that's going to be cut in half the following year. And then you wonder, can your quarterback make up that slack?
I know we're up against Eric. Final question, and I've never asked anyone this, and I wonder if there is an answer, if you've been asked this before. Game flow has such an impact on certain players' ability to get numbers, right? Like if you're ahead, all of a sudden your pass rushers do a lot more. But if you're behind, yes, the other team's more conservative, it's hard to get sacks. Have you guys been able to kind of put the advantages of that type of game flow, the way your team puts certain players into down and distance situations with pass rushers, for example, and other positions too, where you can incorporate that into your grading so you can kind of try to define how good a player is independent of those situations?
Yeah, down and distance and stuff is in our models, score differentials in our models. So you do get a small tick because, as you said, it's easier to rush the passer when you're ahead. It's harder to rush the passer on 1st and 10 when you're behind by 7 because you're trying to stop the run and you're trying to do all this stuff. So yeah, that stuff is very much in there. We're currently building a bottoms up simulation that's going to take that all into explicit account. But you're absolutely right. And if folks want to bet for the road, by the way, the bet to make is Kayvon Thibodeau over sacks this year because of what you're saying. The Giants play an easier schedule than everybody believes, which means there are going to be more opportunities, even for a team like the Giants, who's lined at about 7 wins. They're going to be ahead more than they ever have been the last few years. And I think that's going to lead to some opportunities for the rookie out of Oregon.
Eric, great stuff. Anything you want to promote before we say goodbye?
Yep, just we have an app at PFF that's coming out pretty soon. If you want to sign up to be one of the beta users, go send me an email and I'll get you set up. We're hoping to soft launch the app sometime around 8/15. So I'm really excited for the year. I can't wait to see what the Giants have in store.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait, Eric. Thanks so much. And by the way, the stuff you guys do is great. It's an invaluable resource. I really appreciate it. PFF ultimately is something I'm on every day. I could not do my job without it. I really appreciate all the work you guys do. Thank you very much for the time.
Thanks for having me on. Take care.
That's the episode of the Giants Huddle Podcast. We thank Eric Eager for joining us. Stay tuned, folks, as we continue covering the Giants throughout training camp.